Thank you so much for joining us for this session, where we look to demystify building an agile internal audit function. Now, just to kick us off, I just want to share my presentation that I'll be going through today. Gilbert, you can just confirm to me once that's visible.
Yes, we can see your presentation, Rose.
Lovely, thank you very much. So I just want us to have a very nice, productive session where we'll both be engaging each other in this topic, just trying to appreciate where we are as the Kenya community in terms of shifting from the traditional audit approach to the agile internal audit approach. And from an agenda perspective, we'll be going through just a few things. One, I'll start off with taking you through the agile overview, just giving you an understanding of the key characteristics and the various concepts that relate to the agile internal audit. And moving forward after that, I'll look at two key artifacts of the internal audit agile approach. So that will be the audit canvas. We'll go through that as well as a sample example, and we'll also go into what we call the POV iterative reporting, which is your point of view. Don't be shocked by some of these terms. As we go on, I'll kind of explain what they are and what they mean. And thereafter, we'll just go into a short session where I'll take you through the journey to an agile internal audit function for those who are considering starting, how you then go about that. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end of it all. So before I dive into what the Agile overview is, I'd just like to pose a poll to all of you with regards to where exactly are you in this Agile spectrum? Where are you in this Agile journey? Are we in a state of kicking off? Are we not considering it? Are we exploring it in some function? Just take a moment. The poll should have popped up on your screen just to answer that. And then we can get a view of where exactly the audience is with regards to the Agile journey, just so that I can also adjust accordingly to better explain some of these concepts.
Sorry, Anna.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, Rose. We are on polling question 2.
Yeah, I've noticed.
All right.
Can we just relaunch that to the previous one?
Yes, we can do that.
Sorry, guys, for that. The correct one should have come up on your screen now. Right. Okay. So as we let that run, I'll just jump into just what Agile is. And if most of you have heard the word Agile, I know you've probably thought about it in the concept of software development. And really, this is an ideology that has been running around for the community that deals in developing software. Whereas they had the original Big Bang plan, some people thought it's better to go about it in an iterative approach, whereby you come to a team and do a small component, launch it, see how it goes. And this then took the world by storm. And we also, as the internal audit community, thought that we should be able to adopt this. And that's where the Agile approach commenced on our end. I see from where we're at, we have 20 out of the 31 responses. I think that's good enough for where we are. Maybe we can post the results. So you'll see just from the numbers, not quite a number are not using the approach or are considering exploring, which kind of meshes with where we are as the East African community. This is pretty new, and you'll find that for majority of the organizations that are considering shifting to the Agile approach, some of these are as a result of perhaps the mother company or the global company having rolled out this Agile internal audit approach in their regions and now cascading it down to the rest of the organization, whilst others are just ahead of the trend and are considering kicking it off. But this is a good place to start. So we should be able to have a good engagement session with regards to this. Okay. Just moving into my next slide. So here we just want to have a brief understanding. So what is this Agile thing? And really, Agile is a shift in mindset, okay? It's whereby people come into a collaboration setup. Why do we say collaboration? There's always a level of disconnect in the traditional setup, whereby as internal auditors, we engage the key stakeholders at the onset of the assignment or of the internal audit year, with regards to what are your pain points, what do you want us to look into, as we then go into create and perform our risk assessments, and then proceed onwards to do our internal audit plan. But with regards to Agile, we're looking to shifting from that and having this as a continuous discussion that is being taken on between the audit team and the stakeholders. So we're looking at having an iterative planning and delivery process rather than having a long drawn out audit session and then results at the end, whereby the stakeholder has not been involved throughout the process. What are we also looking for? Early and frequent value. What we mean here is we are able to give insights to our auditees in an early manner and to the stakeholders so that they can then be able to make up key decisions that they need to proceed with for the business. And we listen to feedback. Why? Listening to feedback is important. When you engage with the auditee, they give you their perspective, they give you a view on whether some of these recommendations make sense. Is your understanding of the process correct? So it's good to have that constant engagement. And also on top of that, within the team, there's constant revisiting and re-understanding of the procedures such that you're able to always improve on each iterative you're going through and find a way to be more efficient and a more stable team. Collaboration, we've already spoken about with regards to more engagement with the stakeholders, and that obviously cascades down into transparency. We also look at responding to change, and this is a very powerful point. You know, if we're looking at the past year that we've had, where we had COVID hit all of us out of the blue, most of the businesses were scrambling around trying to figure out, what does this mean for the business? What does this mean for our technology? What does this mean for our people working remotely? How will we be able to continue to support our supply chains, amongst other things? Now, with this being a critical issue, what would then happen is most Agile teams would have taken this new business focus and critical issue, and then use this as an opportunity to identify what gaps are there, what needs to be fixed at that point in time. And so that allows you, the Agile internal audit allows you to respond to change very fast. We're talking about the power of stable teams. Stable teams are necessary. You'll find as I proceed with the presentation that we have what we call Scrum teams, and it's very important that these teams stay together. And when they work together, they continuously understand how each other work, and then they're able to build up a very stable team that will continuously work towards giving you the appropriate results. And then there's this continuous growth and an overall great impact due to the continuous insights that you get through this process. Now, that is a shift in a way of thinking. Not only do we have a shift in the way of thinking, we also have a shift in the way of working, right? So now we're taking on new approaches. you hear me talking about Scrum, and yes, I will touch on that a bit later. These Scrum events allow us to constantly look to respond at a high rate, right? And as I mentioned earlier, this is coming off of the software development approach. So we're looking to create better from what? We have stable teams that perform better. We're looking to work faster. Why? We're iteratively responding and acting on an audit in a span of 2 weeks and giving feedback to the stakeholders with regards to insights that can then be used to make decisions for the business. We're looking at happier, why everyone knows where they're at. And the teams, the auditees, are even able to then understand how you're benefiting the business, and it becomes a whole collaborative setup. And you have much more resilient functions that are able to then work through any changes that are hitting their environment. Okay, so just an overview of what Agile is. And I know I'd already issued this poll, but I will proceed to issue the second poll, because what is of interest here is to find out if you're considering doing Agile, what then are you looking to gain from this? Are you looking to have greater adaptability? Are you looking for improved productivity, increased focus on value? Is it greater speed to insight, or, you know, is there something else over and above that? Yeah, so what, just get to get a feel from the team on how they consider Agile would improve their internal audit process going forward. So as the poll is running, I'll just touch on some of what we have seen in the market in terms of better. When we bring in Agile to internal audit, like I mentioned earlier, there's a greater stakeholder impact. You know, you wake up and you know that there is this project that's ongoing, and these are the issues that are around it, and these are the insights we're getting with regards to controls that probably need to be put in place, and you're able to make those decisions quickly. Improved quality. There's improved quality because there's focus on one item. We don't have teams constantly going back and forth, switching from one control objective that they're testing to another one. In the course of a sprint, the team is required to focus on the objective of that sprint and that sprint alone. And that allows for great quality because all the team members are working towards that. Just to share the results of the policy, we have 23 out of the 38. So you see, we have greater speed to insight, and indeed, that's one of the greatest values of having an agile internal audit approach, closely followed by increased focus on value. Very true. I agree with that. And you'll see all these factors do in one way or another benefits are of benefit to the teams. Yeah. So back to the slide, we have improved resiliency. I already talked about the teams and the functions, better being able to adapt to changes in the environment and increased transparency. We talk about faster with regards to the insight in value and the productivity, and we talk about happier because there's improved auditee engagement and relations, and there's improved team morale because the team is talking to each other, the team is understanding how the work is going, and they're able to collaborate much better with the auditees. Okay, so overall, with Agile, we're looking to have a better, faster, and happier audit. But so then someone would probably ask, how is that any different from the traditional audit approach, right? And if you look to my left, you can see the left of the screen, there's a traditional internal audit in terms of how the structure would work. So you'd have the planning, probably this is a risk assessment that most teams would do around the November period. You'd come down, focus, and get these risk registers out. And then you'd come back and then have a draft internal audit plan, let's say in December. And then thereafter, around January, you have your final audit plan, and then you're good to go. So you post this plan out, you have Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 goals ready to go. And in most cases, there's very small room to deviate from the original audit plan. And the point at which you then engage with the stakeholders would be at the point of then presenting the results of probably Q1 audit. So you find there's a whole 6 to 8 week period of non-engagement with the stakeholders. And there's also the perception that you get from interacting with the auditees. It almost feels like you're policing the auditees, and the auditees also are less willing to then be able to provide the required information that's needed, because it's almost like a reporting cycle. But then you also look on the stakeholders side. Their concerns are, so what is happening through this time? Where are we in the audit process? Am I losing money? Is there something happening? There's this change that has occurred. Has it been factored into the audit? So all these items are plaguing the minds of the stakeholders. And sometimes you find that the audit team is focusing on matters that are not of priority at that point in time, due to perhaps a change in the environment in the course of the year. Shifting to the right, where we look at then the Agile internal audit layout. So we have, you can see I have 4 or 5 buckets. We have 2-week sprints. So we call this a sprint. So a 2-week sprint is pretty much the period it will take to run. The period that it will take to run the audit. So you have the 2 weeks, then you move on to another 2 weeks, to another 2 weeks, to another 2 weeks. So looking here, what happens is at the end of the 2 weeks, you have what we call a point of view. And what is a point of view? A point of view is a summary of the relevant insights that are arising from your observations of what has been ongoing during the audit. And then it's then condensed down such that you are able to correlate it back to the business objective and how then these insights impact that business objective for further action. Okay, and the beauty with this is that the team is more informed because they're constantly engaging with the teams. There's also a reaction to changes in the environment, with the reaction to modify the plan accordingly. And then there's collaboration with the right individuals. Okay, so that's in general how the two are compared to each other. And I'll request the audience to just mute their microphones. I think I'm getting some feedback from someone. Just recheck and mute your microphones. Thank you. So then we move on to a typical execution session, okay? We have quite a number of things here. We have the 4 roles, which are the 4 team members. That's the audit product owner, the Scrum Master, the Scrum team, and the audit champions. And then we also have the 5 events that we'll look at. And then we have the audit, the 5 artifacts that are relevant for purposes of this audit. And I'll just talk through this slide for a bit. So when we talk about the audit product owner, who are we referring to here? This ideally is the individual that then sets the direction and the vision of the audit, in constant interaction with the stakeholders, for purposes of then being able to translate the needs of the stakeholders towards the team, so that they're able to come to the value that is required by the stakeholders. And then there are also the people, the audit product owner is also the role that accepts or rejects the project's iterative results. So we have what we call the definition of ready and the definition of done. So if these have not been met throughout the course of the sprint, then this is the individual that is whose role is to then accept or say we have not yet met the definition of done for the project. And then we have the Scrum Master, and I know a lot of people would like to refer to this as maybe the audit engagement lead, but in truth, the role is a bit shifted in this layout. this is taking on a more of a servant leader approach in the audit team. And what they do is they run the role of the facilitator for the process. So their purpose is to make sure that the Scrum events work according to the plan, and that the mindset of the team is appropriate towards the cause of being able to perform the sprint. They are also the individuals to whom impediments that arise through the audit are escalated to. So their purpose is to assist the core team to then remove the impediments that they encounter in performing the audit. And they're also in charge of growing the team's competencies. Okay. Then we have, of course, the Scrum team itself. Now, these are the people who then know how the work will get done. So they're the people who will probably be doing the working papers that we're used to, right? So their purpose is to contribute to what we call the backlog, and they help identify, draft, and communicate observations that are found throughout the audit. Now, in addition to that, we have an additional role called the audit champion. The audit champion is a very strategic decision maker and more or less a relationship manager. Their role is to socialize and advocate the internal audit, the Agile internal audit, to the teams. Yeah, so they socialize this to the specific stakeholders. And they're also involved in identification of areas or projects to be run within a business area, and they work as a liaison for the teams. Through this all, I think you can see a gray box at the bottom that refers to an Agile coach. Now, when you're adopting an Agile internal audit, the Agile coach is key just to guide the teams in the necessary skill set that's required for the sprints, for them to be able to work as a Scrum team, and then also to be able to just guide them through the process of all these ceremonies that need to be held during the session. So I've talked about the 4 roles that would typically make up the team, and I'll shift now to the 5 artifacts. So we'll start off with the audit canvas, and the audit canvas is really key for any project that you're looking to start off. So we say an audit champion goes and identifies an area of focus or a need in the business that ties in the strategy, and they go and socialize the team and they identify a project. So now this audit canvas is where we then come up with the business objectives, the project drivers, the concludable areas. We'll think about how we'll resource the teams to perform the project, and any other considerations and concerns that would relate to the stakeholders. And I will touch on that document a bit later, just so that you can be able to appreciate what goes into the audit canvas. The second one is a story mapping, and this is really a collaborative approach to defining an outcome of the events. So in the story mapping, you identify the different components that will go into the project, and that will later be broken down into user stories, features, amongst others, and then down to the specific items that then will be audited by the sprint team. And in addition to that, we have the audit sprint and the backlog. And the backlog is really a prioritized list of all the stories used in the sprint planning. So this is where you'll pretty much have all the risks that you need to deal with, and then you prioritize them so that you know which one you're going to focus on first. We talk about work papers, but this is pretty much the same. So you still follow the nature of the standards, whereby you still have to have a business objective, you still have to have controls you're testing, you still have to have your procedures for testing, and then your conclusions and your recommendations, amongst others. So all this still needs to be documented through the process. And the final output of the sprint would typically be the point of view. Now, the point of view, as I mentioned earlier, is pretty much a summary of insights that have come off of the audit that you've performed, sort of a condensed understanding of the area, and also relevant insights that have come off of the audit, just talking about the current state of the risk and the controls in that area, and what can then be done to improve it. Okay. So the 5 events are the sprint planning, the daily stand-up, the sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. I'll talk about that in the next slide, just so that I can take you through the story properly. But if you look at my top left, that typically covers the flow of an audit. So you'd start by, after you've done your audit canvas, you'd start by having the product backlog, the project backlog, more or less. And then you'll cascade it down now to a sprint backlog. So this is a subset of that. For a specific 2 week or 2 to 3 weeks, 1 to 3 weeks, depends on how you plan your sprint period. These are the specific items that need to be focused on for testing. And then you'll still have your daily reviews. And at the end of the sprint period, you then come up with a point of view. So that's the general flow of things. Okay. I'll move on to the next slide, just so that you can have a better view of the ceremonies that occur. So like I mentioned at the onset of the project, you do kick off with the planning. So you start off with getting your various inputs from the various stakeholders. And remember, the audit product owner is involved in this process because they engage with the stakeholders to better understand the value, amongst other things. And then out of this big major project planning session, you come up with the audit plan. Okay. Now that you have the audit plan, you are then able to then cascade this to the team, where you have the sprint planning being done. So you have the whole sprint backlog that's created. And during the planning, some of the things that you do is schedule in the specific ceremonies that need to run. So what ceremonies are we talking about? We're talking about things like the daily stand-ups. And the daily stand-ups are sessions where they're about 15 minutes that occur every day. And the purpose of these sessions is for the team to answer 3 specific questions. What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? And what are my impediments? Impediments in terms of what challenges am I encountering in the work that I'm doing that are stopping me from concluding on the work. Now, this it's a session that is required for all the Scrum team members to attend and be able to give feedback on, and it's usually run at around the same time every day. It's strongly advised for you not to run it at the end of the day, best to run it fasting or early in the morning, so that you can be able to determine what tasks are then going to be done. And you'll see we have the Kanban board, which is pretty much where you'll pretty much indicate which stage you are at with your audit. So are you at the beginning? Are you work in progress? Are you done? And if you're done, have you met the definition of done? Right? And so that's what really happens during the daily stand-ups. You will note that if there are any issues, this may be packed for after the daily stand-up for them to be addressed by the Scrum Master in terms of how they'll assist the specific team to deal with the impediments they've encountered, right? So we then move on to the sprint review. So these reviews it's whereby the team look at what you've done. So in terms of the activities you've done, have you been able to gather all the information you need to understand the story, amongst other things. So reviews do work throughout the sprint process, but at the end of the sprint, we have what we call the sprint retrospective. Now, the sprint retrospective is held preferably a day before the next, one day before the next sprint. And the reason for this is what you're looking to do is to discuss what went well with the sprint, what didn't go well, and what improvements could you make for the next sprint. And this session is really important, and it's typically restricted to the Scrum team. Why? Because at this point, you'll have the teams discussing how they can better improve on their audits going forward. And you then have a lot of ideas that have come out. So it's always good to have a safe space for this. It's also good to allow the various members of the Scrum team to run this session, just so that they can continue to learn how to speak out. And so these sessions pretty much covers what I mentioned, what I liked, what I learned, what I lacked, and what I longed for. And then out of this, we can then come back and see how then we can improve the audit for the next sprint. So that's the general idea around it. And throughout this process, we still have the backlog. And the reason why this is considered an iterative process is because based off of how the sprint went, the team still goes back to the backlog for backlog refinement. Backlog refinement is pretty much whereby the teams look at the business needs and reprioritize once again, providing more detail and making sure that they go into greater clarity on the items. And in some cases, you need to do re-estimations of how long the sprints will take for the next assignment. So this backlog is another living document in addition to the audit canvas. Okay. I think at this point, Gilbert, I'll just defer to you if we have any questions before I proceed to discussing the audit canvas. Gilbert?
Whether they could hear me, please?
Gilbert?
Yes, can someone confirm they can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Rose. This is very informative. And just to the participants, I'm taking your questions on the chat. Do we have any burning questions so far on the first session? Yes, there's a question from Nicholas Njeru, who says, in this context, define the term sprint. Is it a cluster of risk assessments or is it an assignment? Over to you, Rose.
Okay. So when we talk about, you said, is it a cluster of risk assessments or is it an assignment? So remember, when we talk about the audit canvas, that's pretty much where you more or less do your identification of the risks, and there'll be quite a number for the main project. And if I can perhaps take you back to, let me just move back here. Okay, so a sprint will be a time box period, and it's like 2 weeks. It's a very short period of time. You probably have three user stories, which would more or less be a specific objective, a specific controls that you need to test, and specific tasks that you need to do under that. So it's not a cluster of risk assessments. It's more or less a combination of, for the easiest way of saying it, controls that you need to test within a specific period of time for purposes of addressing one specific risk that has been identified that relates to the general business objective or strategy that we're trying to align. I don't know if that sort of helps you with that.
Yes, Rose, that really does clarify on that. I believe Nicholas is now on the clear. Is there anyone with a question? They could put up their hand and then we could just give them a chance to ask a question to Rose. All right, there's a question from Evans Were. So shifting to Agile internal audits, where is the starting point when you want to shift from the traditional internal audit as we know it?
So I was going to talk about, and I will talk about it a bit later in terms of just how you'd go about it. But really, first of all, you need to just assess and identify some pilot areas that you'd like to focus on. So let's say it's an area IT, maybe they've rolled out a new system. And one of the business strategies is that we need to be able to sell our products online. And so as part of the rollout, your key needs would be that there aren't any challenges with how the system will run, because it runs a reputational risk, a financial risk, amongst other risks. So within that, you'll then have a number of ethics, features, and stories, which may relate to maybe controls that you need to test around access security, around how the product features have been configured, amongst other things. So that would be a whole project. Within the project, you'd have these specific epics. Within the epics, you'll have features. Within the features, you'll have stories. And then now the stories are then put together to make a sprint. And I know I'm talking about a lot of terms, and that's why I was trying to just focus on at least the beginning and the end. So it's easier that way. And some of these other things, it's better when you do them practically in a workshop to better appreciate what they mean. But yes, so once you identify a pilot, then you're able to work with a coach to walk you through the skill sets that you need to then be able to tackle this area in an agile manner. There'll be a lot of buy-in that needs to be obtained from the stakeholders in that specific business area. And it will involve a lot of engagement and back and forth. And so there is that bit where you need to do a pilot before you then roll it out or cascade it to other areas. But I'll still speak to that also a bit later.
All right. So just to our audience, today we are talking about Agile. Agile, if you're taking anything from this presentation today, just take, just mention agility to your team, and you will seem very informed, and I'm sure you'll be able to share some of this information with your colleagues. We are going to take the last question for this session, and I'm going to combine these two questions. So how can Agile internal audit be applied in a team of one person? As you mentioned, that there are different 4 roles within the Agile internal audit. So how can it be applied within when an audit team has one person? And also, how do you mix traditional internal audit and Agile internal audit? So last questions, then we proceed, Rose.
Yeah, okay, those are interesting questions. Yes, with regards to Agile, it really works best when you do have a collaboration of teams working on different areas, because the whole point is to have things running in a short sprint, right? It would be, from where I sit, a bit difficult to tackle it as an individual, because you'd have to that collaborative element, you need to tackle engaging with the executive, you need to tackle engaging with the stakeholders, you need to tackle always sitting back and being able to project manage. It's quite a number of things to be done for one person if the team is only made up of an individual. But I think the best way to do this would be to just sit back and constantly reprioritize the risks and always engage with the stakeholders just to know where are their pain points and how can we adjust the audit plan to address their concerns. With regards to a mix between the traditional and the agile approach, like I mentioned, you'd have to have buy-in from the stakeholders. So even the teams that will be the auditees need to appreciate how the agile internal audit is going to be running, because there's going to be a lot of feeding back of each other that needs to be done. So it would be tricky in that the traditional internal audit has a set plan of things, but you could pick one of the business areas and have that be your pilot for the agile approach. And really what has happened is, in most cases where one specific area has been picked for an agile approach, while the others follow the traditional approach, this team that focuses on agile receives so much insight that the other teams start asking if they can have a similar session. So you'll find a lot of the executives and the stakeholders from the Agile appreciating the timeliness of the feedback, and then the others would also want that to be cascaded to the other areas. So I'd say have that as your project starting point, but with an end goal of adopting Agile across all business areas. Gilbert?
Yes, thank you very much, Rose. These are very, as you said, interesting questions, and I think you've answered them to satisfaction. So I think we can continue with your presentation.
Great, awesome. So I'll just now go into the audit canvas. And like I mentioned, this is the document that you kick off with at the start of the project. And we come back to being faced with the old adage of how do we know we're doing the right thing? How do we know we're building the right thing? I don't know how many of you have seen this before, where the customer says they want a swing that looks like this, and they give you the explanation. And then the project leader goes and understands it a different way, cascades it to an analyst who understands it a different way. The programmer does a different thing. And at the end of the day, you come up with something that does not look like what the client wanted, and you build them. If you're an outsourced auditor, like the firms do, you build something that's so great and the client gets billed for so much, and what they really wanted is not met. So the beauty of the audit canvas is because you're constantly engaging with the stakeholders to make sure that you understand their specific pains, you then avoid this situation of having audited or not met the expectations of the stakeholders, right? So what you have on screen is what a typical audit canvas would look like. And it has about 9 segments to it. And remember, what will be very key is that you need to socialize the Agile internal audit and what it will bring to the business and what value it will bring to the stakeholders, so that there is a lot of engagement. Because at the end of the day, this document is a collaboration between the stakeholders and the audit team to then be able to come up with this, okay? So what we have here is upfront identification of business highlights and business concerns. And I'll just start off with the top row, okay, where we cover sorry about that, where we cover the why. Why do we say the why? We're looking for what is concerning the business at this point in time. So you're looking to ask, how does this business area align with the corporate strategy? What strategy needs to be rolled out in this area? What are the business objectives? And how are the objectives then translating into the work that's being done? Are there any issues that are being identified at this point in time that are of concern to the business? And what are the initiatives that are being looked to be resolved around here? And at this point, you'll have a lot of interviews with the various executives accountable, just to be able to appreciate their concerns and be able to tie in the business's expectations against the corporate strategy. Then you'll shift to the second box, which talks about project drivers. And here, what you're really looking to understand is what is most important to the what project is most important to the business, right? You are looking to answer the question of what is the value add of this enterprise? What are we solving? What are we solving by taking on this project, right? And when I say project, I mean the audit project. Remember, we talked about there's a business area we've identified. There's a system that's probably being rolled out. What value will us auditing that specific component with regards to, does this system tie into the business appropriately? What are we looking to solve from that, right? What value will you gain from that? And then we look into the cross-functional impact, which is the third bucket. And here you're looking at, are there any systems that will be involved in this, or businesses that will be affected by this? Are there any compliance considerations we need to factor in? what's going to be the financial reporting impact, if any, of all this. And over here, so you once you have the cross-functional impact, you'll then be able to appreciate how this project will impact the different entities that you'll be interacting with. So fourthly, we have what we call the value proposition. And really this is, what is the business value of doing an audit in this area? How does this audit bring value to the business? I mean, why are we doing this in the first place, right? We're looking to garner insights with regards to, are there any gaps that needs to be addressed from an IT perspective with regards to controls that need to be put in place in the system? Are there some products that haven't been configured well? Is this system actually addressing the business need of going out there? So we cover the value proposition on that point of view. And that's the top line of the audit canvas. Next, we look into the middle line, which talks about who will be involved in the project. And here we're really thinking about, first and foremost, the key stakeholders. So who will be affected by this project? So we have the executives who will be accountable and who will derive value from the project. And then we have the cross-functional executives, that is what other functions will be impacted. And then obviously the internal audit market leaders. So these are the people you will engage to identify who are the key stakeholders for the project. And then thereafter, we'll now move into the sixth bucket, which relates to the project team. And remember, we talked about the audit product owner, the Scrum Master, and the Scrum team. So this is where they sit. So we identify which individuals will make up the project team that will run this specific project. And then any additional information that you'd like to garner off of the who will also be factored in at this point in time. Then we move on to the bottom row where we look at then the what. So once this project is done, what then? So the what is, what are the specific objectives and scope that we're looking to address? What are we looking to accomplish by having this project done? And what is then, what are the concludable areas that we will then derive from this project? So you'll have to determine those at the point of setting up the audit canvas, and thereafter then start working on what we call the backlog. And here it's basically identifying and prioritizing the sprint backlog and defining the project sprint timeframe. So that's what happens in this component. And basically the backlog will be based on the risks that you will have identified in that area and how of what value you then plan on bringing to the business from having reviewed those components. Then we look at, lastly, the audit timeline. So you also set up how long do we think the project will take as a whole, and then we also align on the sprint time frame, the time box. So will it be a sprint for 2 weeks, a sprint for 1 week, a sprint for 3 weeks? You align on that also, and just the target dates of the project as a whole. So that's pretty much how you'd walk through the audit canvas. And like I said, this is a document, a living document that is being worked on in collaboration with the stakeholders and the project team. And you'll find you'll literally almost have a workshop sort of session just to be able to come up with all the factors that will then feed into this document. And the beauty of this is it increases a lot of collaboration and agreement of what the project audit scope will cover for that specific business area. And then it will also help in terms of prioritizing and being able to identify which risks should go up in the backlog and thereby probably form up the first component of the sprint that will be run. And then it will also set just the stage of how things will proceed from there on. So what we have on screen, and I hope this helps. I think I saw someone asking, could you give a sample or something? So this is a sample audit canvas. You can see just by looking at the business highlights, this is a new online customer service platform. I tried to give you this layout before. So basically, it's a system that allows clients to perform self-service tasks, and it allows for updating of beneficiaries and making payments. The fact that it's online exposes the business to a reputational risk and a compliance risk and a fraud risk, amongst other things. And then remember, we talk about identifying any concerns that the business has in this area. And you can see we've highlighted here some self-reported items that may have arisen from the development team, whereby the browser is bringing, policy information, amongst other things. So all this information makes up your understanding of the business highlights and the business concerns. Now, if you look at the project drivers, you'll see that this is a customer portal that's functioning. It's intended since it's launched to run, and any gaps should be addressed at that point in time, but they're planning on rolling out additional functionality. And then you'll see that there's a self-service platform that has been developed, and it needs to be utilized by the consumers to get a 360 view of the customer's information. So those are the project drivers. If you're looking at the cross-functional impact, all the systems that then communicate with this interface fall into systems that would be impacted. And obviously the service and technology are the first line risks. Looking at the value proposition. So the value proposition of running this project is that the platform is well protected and provides accurate information to prevent reputational damage. So that is what we will be looking to address by performing the audit of this customer web portal. And then also to determine through an agile pilot that the new process is mutually beneficial to the auditing and the stakeholders. So that's how we've defined the what. If you come to the who, you see with that there's then listing of the key stakeholders. So you have the accountable business executives, the audit executive, and the cross-functional executives. Moving to the project team, you list out who the project team members will be. And then additional information is that there'll be analytics. So the corporate audit obtains files from this data hub. So that's something that also needs to be taken into consideration and needs to be factored in terms of, are they getting the right information? Then lastly, if we look at the deliverables, so the project objectives, you're looking at the data interfaces. Are they working okay? Is authentication and verification of users working okay? Is there confidentiality, integrity, and availability? Session management when the customers are online to make sure that their sessions are not hacked into. Application access monitoring. So those form the specific objectives and probably the specific epics that will then make up comprise the project. And then now you come into the backlog. So like sprint 1 will involve understanding the interfaces, securing the data, understanding the session management, duplicating the sessions, and the vulnerability. And the sprint will probably run for 16th to the 17th of December of that month. So that's pretty much how you do the sample audit canvas. And then, like I said, it's a living document. So you still come back here and think about the sprint 2, sprint 3. Are we addressing, have we met the definition of done? Have we met the definition of ready, amongst other things? Just to be able, until you're able to then answer the question of have we met the value proposition of having done this project? So that concludes my coverage of the audit canvas, and I'll be shifting onwards to speak about the point of view iteration. I see there's questions, perhaps, Gilbert?
Yes, very well presented, Rose. And I've just been here ticking the 9 boxes as you're going through the presentation. And I'm sure we have the audience really glued in and listening to your presentation. So could we just take a moment and take questions around the audit canvas so that we can just conclude on this particular area. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we can take 2 or 3 questions. Yeah, so Elizabeth says that it seems that some of the roles of the second and third line of defense will be gray or the duplicate since risk management will be running a similar process. Yeah, how does How is this addressed, Rose?
Yeah, and that's why I was saying there's a differentiation between the traditional internal audit approach and the agile. For the traditional, you'd have, there's a team that runs with the risk, there's a team that runs with the auditing. But the agile is a combination of everyone, including the people that you'll be answering to. And it takes away the hierarchical structure and the separations such that you come all together to do the collaboration. So it's much flatter, a much flatter approach to auditing, so such that you pretty much have the stakeholders you speak to, you come and collaborate with them to understand what their needs are, identify the risks that need to be done, once again, in a collaborative process. And then the auditing or the reviews will be done specifically by the Scrum team, right? During the sprints. And once again, you realize it's a very focused area that you're looking at, because the projects are not intended to run for a long time. So yes, I can see why there's that concern about the roles, but once again, this is a shift in mindset from the traditional approach of having all these silos and then moving into now a more collaborative approach. I don't know if that sort of answers you. It would probably make sense to have a team that comprises of all, so that all these benefits are then adopted for an agile pilot.
Absolutely, absolutely, Rose. And this topic came up during the ISACA Kenya conference that we just had in June. And there was a talk about fusion centers and combined assurance frameworks where different assurance teams are working together. So yes, this agile internal audit and the audit canvas also speaks to that. So I believe, Elizabeth, you're well answered. Nicholas, your question is not very clear. So maybe you can just, as we continue, you will send me your question so that I can be able to post it to Rose. But thank you very much, Rose. So far, this is very enlightening. And I mean, times are changing and so is audit. So I believe you mentioned something about workshops, Rose. You could, you will probably engage the audience at some point and tell them how you can partner with them on these workshops, yeah?
Sure, definitely. Okay. So I think I'll then proceed into the point of view iterative reporting. And you'll remember I mentioned this as a point that comes at the end of the sprint, right? So a point of view, as I mentioned earlier, is pretty much insights that are gained from the sprints that you've done. So you've gone and observed the processes, you've got an understanding of the issues that are at hand, you've done your testing of the controls against the risks, you've gotten some exceptions or insights around the area. The point of view is required to be very short and concise. It's almost like an elevator pitch. So if someone was to ask you, what are the insights out of the sprint that you've done, you'd have to almost say it in the shortest 3 words possible to then explain what you got out of the project. So the first bullet, it's short and concise. It always ensures that you tie back to the strategy. And then what happens is the auditor gives the current state of how the things have been identified as being, and then where there can be further improvement to help the business then meet the strategy. So this would be basically your exposures that you've identified during the project. And why we need this point of view is because it allows you to then appreciate the work that has been done. So it focuses and articulates the relevance of the specific work that has been done. It allows for brainstorming and also buy-in. So once you go back to the stakeholders and you're giving them a point of understanding of what this point of view was, you're telling them the key issue we've probably picked up is that as much as you're running training for the staff, the staff then proceeds to not follow procedure with regards to completion of some mandatory forms that need to be done thereafter. So it then means that there needs to be monitoring that's put in place to make sure that these forms are concluded with regards to, let's say, creation of users into the system. So it allows you to tie back, and then it also just articulates the so what. So why did we do this audit? What value did you bring? So each sprint will have a point of view that comes out of it that will be socialized to the stakeholders, just so that we can then understand, have we met the definition of done for this specific sprint that we were looking at? And it's the sprints are so focused that it's specific to one area. So you're not interacting with other components to then move out of the necessities, but it still allows you to refine your understanding, refine the risks much better, refine your controls, so that there's better understanding of what it is you're doing, such that when you come to then give your point of view, there's a better feedback on what the current state is and what the end state is. So having said that, if you just look at what then a point of view analysis pretty much looks like, is you're asking yourself, or rather you're asking the team to take a step back and always ask themselves, so how are things then aligned to the business strategy, right? And what exactly was the business objective, and have we met it? And are there objectives that are being achieved by the work that we're doing? Remember, we still have the value that the project, you still have to keep that top of mind. But on the flip side, looking at the focus analysis, and that's the bottom-up approach, you're looking at what are the commonalities that we're picking up. Is there something that's trending? If the issue is it's training, is there an issue with how we're rolling out training in the firm or in the company that's affecting how then activities are being performed? So there's a thematic problem probably around training, or there's a thematic problem around compliance. Those things are then brought in so that you can nip pretty much the issue in the bud. And then sometimes it may be a culture issue. So bring out the difference, the specific culture items that need to be called out and that impact the business, so that you can then look for a culture transformational perspective towards it. Okay. So the influences of the point of view, like I mentioned, one of the key ones is the value drivers. Is there any, why are we spending so much time here, and what insights are we looking to get out of this? And then this is the opportunity for advancements and prioritization, once again, to the business, right? So you'll always be considering this and looking at things such as threats, the competition. Are there any laws and regulations that are coming back that will impact this specific strategy and this project area that needs to be factored in? And you tie all that into your conclusion such that your insights bring in all these elements. Okay. So then I think what we have here is what we call a sample point of view. So as you can see, the first component you have is the project point of view. So we have the project point of view, and that will be a consolidation of the sprint point of views. Remember, you'll have multiple sprints within one project, but once again, at the end of each sprint sprint, you'll need to then socialize the point of view to the stakeholders, just so that we can see if we have met the definition of done for that component. So the project point of view will always tie back to the objective. So you'll be saying what was specific strategy, what was specific driver that we were trying to achieve here, what was the current state that we found, and what are the key insights that we've gotten. And then now on a lower level, you then come in and bring in the different conclusions from the different sprints, always trying to tie it back to the objective. The beauty of this is because if you're talking about it from a business objective perspective, there's greater appreciation of the issues that you're then bringing to the table. In terms of just how the information would look, you just typically have your usual observation impact. and thus then mapping backwards, and then obviously the rating, as we always do. At the end of all this, you still have to do the final report. But once again, the beauty is that the stakeholders have been aware of the issues throughout the project, because you engage with them at the beginning and the end of every sprint. Okay, I think that concludes the bit on the point of view. Gilbert, I don't know if we have any questions.
We still have a few questions. You can hear me, Rose, yeah?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect, perfect. So 2 questions here. Are there any commercial audit management tools that already support Agile approach? And how do you deal with scope creep, especially when you're engaging stakeholders? Will the scope be always changing? So those 2 questions, please.
Okay, I'll take the scope creep. I think that was the one Nicholas raised earlier, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. Remember the audit canvas that we had? It's very specific, and it ties specifically to a certain business area and a certain project that you're trying to address. While you're doing that, you then come up with the backlog. The backlog is literally the risks that you pick out that need to be looked into in that area. And why scope creep would be not really a big issue would be because what you're doing is you always have backlog refinement. So if anything, you'll either be looking and identifying risks that either are not relevant, that may need to drop off of the project, and others that are refined to then speak to the current issue. And in some cases, there may be a change in the environment that then requires us to add items. So once again, it's a living document, but there are set focus areas that you need to look at, and there are set times for the project conclusion. And remember, you always ask the team to assist you in determining the definition of ready, right? The definition of ready is basically asking at when we have what when we've done what specific tasks will you deem this project as having been met? And that definition of ready is what you'll always test yourself against to then be able to determine if you've met the definition of done, amongst other things. So with those parameters, it kind of forces you not to, keeps you within the time box that you've set for the project. I hope that kind of helps in a response. Remember, it's an iterative process, so you're constantly, it's literally like you're risk assessing throughout the project.
Yes, Rose, that answers the question.
Okay.
Yes. On the second one, yeah. This is on the, do we have any tools currently that supporting this new approach to audit?
So specific tools, I think, how would I put it? Not really, because to what the Agile methodology does is it's a change of mind, right? It's not really about the tools. When you speak about tools, you're talking about basically how maybe we can use RPA to help the process, or what audit tools we can ask to assist in the Agile adoption, right? So there's no tool that replaces the human element of being able to collaborate and think per se, but you can have tools to enable the Agile adoption. So you can have maybe teammates to help you with still charting out your risks. You can have a dashboard that is being used for purposes of having your Kanban, putting up your, this is where we are, this is where we are, this is what is work in progress, this is what is done. So the tools here would be enablers to the audit process. They're not really replacers of the Agile approach. But as it stands, I cannot speak to knowing a specific tool that supports specifically the Agile approach, just because all the tools that are out there are enablers of the audit process.
All right. This is very rich, and I see this conversation going on to into our audit departments, into the audit committees, as well as the board level. This is very interesting, and I'm sure the audience, we have a rich audience from both private and public institutions, from various industries, and I'm sure this is a conversation that will be ongoing as you continue with your presentation, Rose.
Thank you, Gilbert. I think the focus for this session was just to just bring the understanding of what Agile is, and sort of just to give you a sneak peek into the specific key artifacts. And I know I've only spoken about two, but it just goes to show you the beginning and the end and how it looks like. And moving forward, I just want to go into the journey to an Agile internal audit function. And while doing that, I want to just launch another poll, because just to ask the question, what is a top challenge you faced or would expect to face when you're implementing an Agile internal audit function? Would it be that there's a lack of understanding on what the objectives are, inconsistent application of Agile across teams, right? Will there be resistance to change, lack of support? Just take a moment. Let's see what the general feel is out there. As that is running, I'll just start off on talking about the how. So great, we've talked about Agile. It's this amazing revolutionary concept in the internal audit world. But then how do you go about it? And what we do as a firm is we usually advise our clients that it's best to do two things. One, have an Agile internal audit lab session. So this is typically a session that looks to explore the value proposition. So we'll have members that span from the executives, the internal audit team, and even representatives from the different business areas, all sit in a room, and we basically we take them through what an Agile internal audit is. So a much more wider session than what I'm giving today. So we'll talk about the other elements that have not been covered, including storyboarding, being able to create a user stories, the epics, the features, amongst other things, how you sit down and do the whole POCA challenge, which is basically the procedure that's used to estimate how long a sprint it will run for and how long a task will take for completion. So it's a bit more of a practical workshop session that allows the business to see the value of Agile. So that is a workshop that's typically a lab that's run. And then in addition to that is just to have Agile Scrum training workshops. Once again, remember, this is a shift in mindset. So we're looking to have people move from thinking about the traditional internal audit lay of land, whereby you start off with with a risk assessment, have your audit plan, and then not change throughout the full year of the audit, and shifting it to an iterative approach. So that in itself requires a certain set of skills. Also, just the Scrum Master being able to shift from the supervisory role of maybe a project manager, whereby you are waiting for deliverables for review, and instead being a servant leader who then is always constantly engaging with the team on a daily basis to make sure that everyone is on track. This requires a mind shift, and these are some of the skills that are usually transferred during the workshops. So yeah, this would be what I'd advise as a good starting point for organizations that are considering Agile. And then thereafter, then what would be key would be to then take the team into determining their manifesto, which is basically what are your must-haves and what are your want-haves for your agile adoption. And then you identify a pilot project where you can then run this agile approach on, and the specific team that will then do that. And in that area, you then have a coach. Remember, I'd mentioned the coach, the agile coach, who sits with the team and basically assists them throughout the pilot, so that they appreciate the specific concepts, and then thereafter, then look at how you can roll out to the rest of the firm, of the company. I think I have 29 out of 40 responses on the poll, so I'll just end it at that point. And you'll see one of the biggest, or rather the red, is that there'll be resistance to change. The organization's culture differs with the agile values. And this is true of any change to any organization. There's always that resistance from the team. And that's why we say the agile approach, the agile internal audit is a beautiful tool to use. Why? Because the Scrum team that will be involved in the audit are able to bring in their thoughts. The stakeholders are able to bring in their thoughts to the table, and you're able to come with such value-adding insights that will pretty much be envied by anyone else who's doing that approach. And that's the beauty. But of course, at the end of the day, if you have a resistance to anything, then rolling it out will always be a challenge. And that's why we say it's really important to have these sessions where you engage with the teams to then have that mindset shift, so that they're able to understand what benefits the agile approach will bring. I see for the other items is a lack of clear understanding and limited access to an agile coach. I think from a limited access to an agile coach, well, these are services we do offer. If you engage with, for instance, Deloitte, we're able to walk with you through the process of agile adoption and afford you an agile coach who can take you through the process. The lack of clear understanding of objectives that Agile is trying to achieve would typically be nipped in the bud during the audit canvas setup. And that's why, again, it's important for everyone present to be able to contribute and make sure that the document is a live and living document. So if you're looking to then turbocharge your Agile adoption, of key importance, as always, given this is a massive change to the organization, is to engage the leadership. Remember, tone at the top always sets the tone at the bottom, right? So if you can engage leadership to appreciate the importance of adopting an agile internal audit approach and be able to showcase the insights, for instance, from a pilot project, then you get more buy-in from the stakeholders to then roll it out across the organization. Once again, you're thinking about creating a safe space. Remember, we mentioned that at the end of the sprints, you always have the opportunity to look back and see how the sprint ran. And this is a session where the teams are able to speak up and be able to share how they can proceed to improve on the audit going forward. And this kind of involvement allows for team motivation as well as resilience building, and also an innovative space for teams to work on. This is where probably someone will say we can use this tool to perform analytics for the next sprint, you know. So creating a safe space is very important to shoot through your agile adoption. Reducing hierarchies is another key thing. Remember, you're shifting from having all these layers that you need to go through even for a review process, and flatten such that you just have the Scrum Master, who is a servant leader, who's working with the teams, and then them being a facilitator, and then you having the audit product owner who is constantly engaging with the stakeholders to make sure that the values are translated properly to the audit team. So you have such a lean team that's focused on such a focused item. That reduction in hierarchy also ensures that you do not have delays or a lot of expenditure of time on moving through the various levels of review. We're not saying you throw your methodologies out. What really is key here is you to adopt these risks that you already have and that have already been identified, and then refining them once again, and then bringing all your work into your backlog so that everyone can see how much is still left to be done, and what needs to be refined, probably what needs to be dropped off. And remember, at the end of it all, always celebrate success. If a project has been successful and there were things that were used that enabled the success of that agile project, and the insights that were yielded were very value adding, this is a celebratory moment that then allows for the teams to then continue with the same motivation for subsequent audits. Okay. Lastly, I'll just say agile, it's not something you do. It's something you become, because as I've been saying all through, it's a mindset shift, right? It's a change of how you do things. So just keep that in mind, even as you continue to consider adopting agile going forward. Gilbert, I think we can take in some Q&A at this point.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rose. This is very informative, and I'd like to give a chance to one of our participants maybe to ask a question verbally. So if you're ready with that question, just put up your hand and we will give you that opportunity to do so. We have had a very engaging session. We have talked about Agile being a shift in mindset. We have talked about the audit canvas. We have talked about the POV, iterative reporting, and we have lastly talked about how you can turbocharge your, your internal audit function to adopt Agile. So this is very informative, Rose, and we thank you for your time. So there's a question here from Ezekiel. So he's asking, how do you effectively do Agile audit for distributed virtual Agile teams, but teams that rarely meet?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, COVID. We've had the chance to learn how to work remotely, and this is why I say we have a lot of tools which can serve as enablers to the work that we do. A simple platform like Teams is very good for the kind of agile audit you'd want to do. Teams allows you to do storyboarding. It allows you to have project management done. It allows you to hold and schedule your sprint daily stand-up sessions on call. You have every team come on, and in fact, if anything, we advise that you don't record the stand-up session on the team session. Make sure it's live and all attendees are present, so that you have the engagement that you need to answer, what do I need to do, what have I done, and what are the impediments. So having the teams in different locations does not stop the work. You just need to use these tools and these enablers to support your project management and just make sure everyone is on track. Yeah, Gilbert?
Yes, well answered. Excellent. Yeah. I believe, do we have someone in the audience who would like to ask their question verbally? This is your chance. Be agile, yeah? This is your chance to clarify anything that you would like to get to know about Agile. internal audit, the audit canvas, the POV, iterative reporting, and how you can adopt agile internal audit within your functions. So yeah, there's one question by John. Is asking whether the agile internal audit approach is similar to the CATA model implemented by companies to improve efficiency. Is it the same or similar to the CATA model?
I'll actually have to say I'm not sure about that. Maybe it's because I'm not familiar with the CATA model, but I do know that some of these efficiencies that were even adopted by, is it Toyota, in terms of just how you project manage your teams to completion of, you know, the whole production process. Pretty much all these themes are what have been pulled in. You know, you have your lean, you have your Kanban, you have your agile, and then all these have been brought together to improve the agile adoption. So yes, at the end of the day, to some extent, it's just borrowing from all these different models.
All right. Thank you, Rose. Before we hand over to the Secretariat and we welcome the ISACA Kenya President and the ISACA Kenya CEO, I would just like to ask one final question. How does the Agile internal audits fit in? Like traditionally we have audit work plans, and you know, these have to be presented to the board committees for approval. How does this how is this implemented within the Agile internal audit function, and how do you sell the same at a board level?
Okay. Once again, so remember you have your, I'll take you back to the audit canvas because really that's where you engage with the various committees in terms of where you're going to focus your work on, and basically from that you have to get the approval to proceed with the project. You can't just start the project just because you've had the session. No, there has to be approval with regards to what's your definition of ready, what's your definition of done, what are the specific metrics that will be assessed for the project. And once you get that approval is when you can proceed with the project. So really, to that extent, that's how it sort of mirrors the work plan that gets approved by the board. It's just, it happens more frequently, and for what I'd call almost bite-sized projects, that is where you have that sort of differentiation, but approval is still needed at the end of the day. Yeah, I didn't catch your second question. Do you mind repeating it?
Okay, how do you sell Agile to the board? As you know, it's a new concept, and yeah, so how do you show the value in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, remember, and I'll probably drag you back to the old, you know, remember the slide I had where we were asking, where the stakeholders are always asking, where are we in the audit? What issues are coming up? Are we factoring in this new thing that has hit the market? The things that keep the stakeholders up at night need to be top of mind, and that's really where you're prioritizing your audit. So you sell it from that perspective. You sell it from a perspective of we will be focusing on the matters that are keeping you up at night, so that we can come up with recommendations of things that can be implemented to then improve or address the specific risk as and when it appears, and be able to give you that feedback in a timely manner. Really, that's how you sell it. But once again, we are always available to also guide you through the process. As Deloitte, we do these sessions for workshops for the boards. It's like a 1.5 session where we take them through the whole process, just so that they can better appreciate the beauty and the efficiency of adopting the Agile internal audit approach.